So, a journey that kicked off with a bit of mischief in the fields of Vrindavan is now heading towards a much, much heavier destination. A young boy, who is so much more than that, is walking right into the city where a prophecy of death hangs over its king. Let's dive into how this all goes down.
Hey everyone, today we're jumping into one of the most epic confrontations in the Mahabharata, the fated showdown between the young hero Krishna and his tyrannical uncle, King Kansa. This is a story that's got everything: prophecy, raw power, and the end of a whole era.
You'd think a story like this would start with a huge battle, right? Well, not this one. It actually begins with a series of really heart-wrenching goodbyes. Before Krishna can even think about facing his destiny in Mathura, he has to leave behind Nangaon, the only world, the only home he's ever known.
Wow, this quote, it just hits you, doesn't it? It perfectly captures the deep, deep fear of Krishna's foster mother, Yashoda. I mean, she raised him, she loved him, but she knows she isn't his birth mother. And as he's getting ready to leave, her absolute biggest fear is that this biological fact is finally going to put a real distance between them.
In this slide, it just lays out the inner turmoil that Krishna himself is going through. On one hand, he's Yashoda's son. Everything is familiar: his friends, his home, the butter he was always getting in trouble for stealing. But on the other hand, he's Devaki's son. He's a prince, on his way to a city he doesn't know, to meet a king who's also his uncle, and to finally get some answers about who he really is. He's literally leaving one identity behind to go find another.
And then there's the goodbye with Radha. Man, her words here are just incredibly powerful. They both get that this isn't just a personal tragedy. Their separation is a sacrifice that has to happen. She completely understands that for the welfare of the world, for the honor of humanity, they have to part ways. So their personal pain is completely tied up in a much, much greater purpose.
Okay, so after all those goodbyes, Krishna and his brother Balaram finally get to Mathura, a city that's basically choking under the thumb of the tyrant Kansa. But from the second they walk in, it is crystal clear that they are a massive force for change.
So check this out. It's like he's making a statement, step by step. First, an act of pure kindness. He heals a woman with a hunched back. Then, an act of total defiance. He takes the king's own clothes from the royal washerman. I mean, that's a direct challenge to authority. And finally, the big one, an act of impossible strength. He just snaps the kingdom's sacred bow, a bow so huge that even Kansa had trouble with it. Each act sends a bigger and bigger shockwave through the city.
And you better believe those shock waves reached the palace. When Kansa hears the sound of that bow snapping, this is what he says. Now, for a tyrant who rules by making other people afraid, admitting fear himself, that's monumental. A boy he's never even met has done what no army ever could. He's made the king afraid.
So Kansa's panicking, right? And what does a tyrant do when he gets scared? He sets a trap. He organizes this grand wrestling competition, but really it's just a public execution in disguise. The plan is to get rid of this threat before it gets any closer. So the wrestling arena, that becomes the stage for the final act.
And Kamsa is not playing around. His gauntlet is brutal. First, he unleashes a wild elephant that's been trained to kill. But get this, the elephant is not only subdued, it actually seems to salute Krishna. Then, inside the arena, he throws them against his two greatest wrestlers, Chanur and Mashtik, in what everyone knows is a death sport.
But this is exactly where Kansa's plan starts to fall apart. The crowd, they see what's going on. They see two young boys being thrown against these giant, seasoned champions. They know it's not a fair fight. It's meant to be a slaughter. And you can just feel the whispers of injustice starting to spread through the stands.
Then, as Krishna and Balaram don't just survive, but actually start to dominate these champions, those whispers turn into full-blown roars. The people, who have lived in fear of Kansa for so long, are now openly cheering for his downfall. The entire tide of public opinion has turned against the king right in the middle of his own arena.
With the champions defeated, there's nobody left. No more obstacles, no more buffers. The path is finally clear for the moment that has been prophesied for years, the face-to-face meeting between the tyrant uncle and the nephew who is destined to end him.
So as Krishna just calmly walks towards the throne, this is the question, isn't it? All the schemes, all the power, All the fear Kansa has built up is about to be tested by one boy walking to fulfill his destiny.
Kansa has one last trick up his sleeve. With this fake smile, he invites Krishna in for a hug, probably planning to crush him right then and there. He talks about cooling the fire in his heart, but we all know it's a fire of pure rage and fear. This is his last desperate move in a deadly game.
But the game is over. Krishna overcomes his uncle and Kansa is killed. Now what's so fascinating is how this moment is described. It's not just a death. It's seen as an honorable death, because by being killed by a divine being, Kansa's massive, overwhelming ego is finally dissolved. His tyranny doesn't just end with his life, it ends with the destruction of the very pride that fueled it.
And that's the key takeaway here. The prophecy that drove Kansa mad with fear, that made him imprison his own sister, the one that set this entire story in motion, it's finally come true. The son of Devaki has returned, and the people of Mathura are free. Which brings us to our final thought. A great evil is gone. A prophecy has been realized, and a city is free. But that's never really the end of the story, is it? It's always the beginning of a new one. It really makes you wonder, with the tyrant gone and his destiny met, who does Krishna have to become now?